Wine was another favorite. The vintage and the chateau were carefully recorded on the wine jar. The River Nile has always been the lifeblood of Egypt. It still is, but it can be painfully slow and tiring to fetch water from the river. The renegade pharaoh had a better idea. This circle in the sands is an old well, one of many found in private homes. These wells provided clean drinking water and allowed bricks of dry mud to be made on the spot. They were handy, too, for watering the garden. No self-respecting resident could afford to be without one. But Akhenaten didn't come to this forsaken place to win a town planning award. He came to build a holy city to the sun god. And he charged his best artist with the job of turning his dream into reality. Thutmose was the king's favorite sculptor. It was in his workshop, in this very corner, that a German expedition in 1912 made a wonderful find. This bust of Nefertiti had been buried under rubble for more than 3,000 years. It's a work of art unlike any in ancient Egypt and underlines the importance Akhenaten attached to perfection. No one knows why one eye is missing. Most experts now think it fell out in antiquity. Maybe it's still out there, waiting to be discovered. Akhenaten's pursuit of perfection was single-minded. Buildings, too, had a role to play. These are the remains of a palace. When it was first excavated, the walls in this room were found covered with fragments of a mural that has now been reconstructed. The room opened onto a secluded garden court. The best preserved examples of Akhenaten's devotion to the Aten are to be found inside the nobles' tombs. This one was never finished, but it shows how the stonemasons carved the columns straight out of the rock. It was built by a military officer called Ai, probably Nefertiti's father, for himself and his wife when the time came. The highlight of the tomb is a religious text carved on one of the walls. It's a hymn by Akhenaten dedicated to the sun god Aten. What's so remarkable is its similarity to a psalm in one of the world's most sacred books, the Bible.
O living sun disk, thou art beautiful, great, glittering. When thy movements fade, the land is in darkness. Every lion is out of his den. O Lord my God, thou art very great. Thou art clothed with honor and majesty. Thou makest darkness, and it is night. The young lions roar after their prey.
It strikes you when you read those texts very much like a religious revelation, a flash of insight that a prophet might receive from his God.
The hymn to the Aten is more amazing still because it anticipates the central belief of the Bible. This hymn is the very first recorded expression of monotheism, the belief that there is only one true God. Because of his monotheism, Akhenaten comes across as a religious visionary ahead of his time, a forerunner of the great prophets of Judaism, Christianity, and Islam. And yet Akhenaten's revolution had barely begun. His goal was to reform ritual as well as belief. The Aten was worshipped right here in this temple. As in other cults, ordinary people were kept out of the temple. Only Akhenaten and his priests could enter the inner sanctuary. But Akhenaten came up with a new idea for including the people in the worship of the Aten. An aerial view of the Amarna region shows that the king had boundary stones installed to define the city limits. There were also definite axes pointing east and north. When architect Michael Mallinson analyzed a recent survey of Amarna by the Egypt Exploration Society, he noticed that the boundary stones and the temples formed a series of perfect rectangles. What did it all mean? There's a clue in the geometry of the temple itself. Its proportions, when projected out, are the same as those of the city limits. It's as if the whole city had been made into a temple.
Everyone can see the horizon of the Aten where the god first appears, and it can be worshipped as such. He's opening it all out, so suddenly it's all apparent, it's all visible. So it's gone from being a religion which is closed to a religion which is open, and that's completely consistent with the way he himself represents his religion.
It seemed as if ordinary Egyptians may have ignored Akhenaten's offer. Excavations at a workers' village suggest a reluctance to give up the old and familiar ways.
There was still a certain amount of worship of traditional gods, or there were certainly chapels, and there is evidence for various fertility gods and things associated with the ordinary people, which may suggest that they weren't that interested in Artenism.
Akhenaten soon began to provoke greater controversy by changing the status of the king himself. The ancient Egyptians saw their kings as a vital link between the gods and humankind. It seems that Akhenaten was aspiring to a much more exalted position. This is one of the most frequent reliefs found at Akhenaten. It shows the royal couple at a balcony handing out gifts to members of the nobility. Thanks to copies made when they were in better condition, such scenes can now be recreated. This one is known by Egyptologists as a window of appearance. It shows Nefertiti's presumed father, Ai, being rewarded for his loyal support. Although it looks like a secular palace ceremony, new finds suggest that this ritual had heavy religious overtones. Recently, a team from the Egypt Exploration Society, run in the field by Kate Spence, found some intriguing foundations in an area of the city known as the North Palace. Among the finds were the bases of large-scale statues. They hinted at a major complex. Just how important a complex became clear when tiny fragments of a precious metal were found.
There you are, a nice big bit of gold leaf coming out in front of your very eyes.
It was the first trace of gold found at the North Palace since the 1920s and was evidence of something special and religious.
It was associated with the sun and with the flesh of the gods, and the fact that it shines, that when light falls on it, it reflects off it, was very important for the Egyptians.
The golden statues could only be of Akhenaten. Kate Spence also discovered that they had stood next to the base of another mysterious structure. She's now recovered it with sand to protect it from the elements.
The gypsum foundations are extremely well preserved. We've also been getting a lot of fragments of gold leaf, which show that it was a very, very important architectural structure, probably a big gilded gateway.
The whole structure bore the hallmarks of one of the balconies where the nobles received their gifts. So what were the religious overtones of this ceremony? A vital clue lay in the strange orientation of the palace. It was aligned to the east. Usually only temples pointed east. Perhaps the palace was intended to be like a temple, but who then was the object of worship?
As one enters the building, one is approaching directly towards the king, who is therefore set up in a similar sort of way to a cult image in a temple, and where he appears as a divine or semi-divine figure.
Hardly the style of a humble prophet, more like the delusions of a megalomaniac. What exactly was going through Akhenaten's mind? An insight into his thinking can be gleaned from his tomb. Like all pharaohs, Akhenaten built his tomb while he was still alive. The nobles' tombs in the Amarna plain were cut into the surrounding cliffs, but not Akhenaten's. He built his 4 miles further east, deep into a valley that winds its way through the desert. It's always been a mystery why the royal tomb is so remote. When first discovered earlier this century, it was virtually empty. But there was one bit of treasure that couldn't be removed: the reliefs. And they reveal much about Akhenaten's religious ideas. This damaged relief shows the king and queen carved in an unflattering style with sagging stomachs and ample thighs, a far cry from the idealized picture of royalty usually seen on tomb paintings. In these and other reliefs, the king and queen are also shown revealingly naked, in defiance of the normal conventions of Egyptian art.
Imagine, for example, if a future king and queen of England had themselves portrayed nude. It would be quite a shock. And I think this was probably the same sort of thing for the Egyptians. There is a reason why Akhenaten is shown this way. Akhenaten was trying to show the royal family as different from the rest of mankind, closer to the gods.
And there was another telling difference. Egyptian tomb paintings, like this one in Thebes, usually show highly formal scenes of the pharaoh about to enter the afterlife, his destiny very much in the hands of the gods. Akhenaten's reliefs depict surprisingly intimate and informal scenes in which the members of the royal family itself, not the gods, are the center of attention. In this scene, the king and queen are shown mourning the death of a daughter. Here, Akhenaten is seen dining with his mother. And here, Akhenaten and Nefertiti are seen exchanging affectionate glances.
I think the purpose was to convey to the ancient Egyptians that here you have not only the model of human life, but also the source of all love. And so the idea, of course, is that all life flows from Akhenaten and Nefertiti, just as it originally did from the gods.
No pharaoh had ever associated himself with a god as closely as Akhenaten, and yet there are signs that he was aiming higher still. Akhenaten's ultimate ambition is revealed in a radically new view of the afterlife.